Fallout's most horrifying human experiments explained. Fallout has a lot of obvious monsters: super mutants, centaurs, Deathclaws, Robobrains, Spore carriers. The kind of things you see in the wasteland and instantly understand that something went horribly wrong. But the more you dig into Fallout lore, the more disturbing it gets, because most of those horrors did not begin with the bombs. They began in labs. Before October 23, 2077, the old world was already treating human beings like disposable material. Vault-Tech was building controlled societies underground. West-Tech was pushing the forced evolutionary virus from medical research into biological warfare. Nuka-Cola was turning radioactive military compounds into a glowing soft drink. General Atomics and the US military were putting human brains inside robot shells. MedTech was locking test subjects in sub-level cells. And Big MT was doing the kind of science that makes the word research sound like a threat. They were funded, approved, documented, and filed away in terminals like quarterly reports. And that is the real difference between Fallout's creatures and Fallout's scientists. The creatures are usually victims of the old world's experiments. The scientists were the ones taking notes. So today, we are looking at Fallout's most horrifying human experiments. Nuka-Cola Quantum, the soft drink that used people as radiation testers. Nuka-Cola Quantum is one of the most Fallout things ever created because it takes something as stupidly cheerful as soda and turns it into a military-adjacent radiation experiment. This is not some secret vault chamber with people strapped to tables. This is worse in a very specific Fallout way. It is a consumer product. A bottle with a bright blue glow, a catchy slogan, and enough corporate branding to make people forget that the same compound inside it was originally part of a weapons research program. The horror starts with Project Cobalt. In Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC, we learn that Project Cobalt was a Nuka-Cola Corporation research program tied to US military sponsorship. John Caleb Bradburton, the founder of Nuka-Cola, was not just running a soda empire by this point. He was working with military applications for radioactive compounds. Project Cobalt was not originally about giving kids a glowing drink for their lunchboxes. It was about weaponizing isotope-based technology. The results later included things like Nuka Nukes, Nuka Quantum Grenades, weaponized Thirst Zapper ammunition, and even Quantum XE01 power armor. The key ingredient was tied to strontium-90. The Beverageer division at Nuka World discovered that a derivative of the isotope produced a bright, long-lasting blue glow. In a normal company, that should have been the moment everyone backed away slowly. In Nuka-Cola logic, that was the moment someone smelled marketing. Quantum was not just another flavor. It was meant to look futuristic, energetic, and almost magical on a shelf. Twice the calories, twice the carbohydrates, twice the caffeine, and twice the taste. Rex Meacham, one of the key beverageers, was involved in turning the Project Cobalt compound into the Quantum formula. The drink itself was created around October of 2076, less than a year before the bombs fell. Then came live testing. The drink was tested under the codename Sea Lion at regional facilities. The early trials were not clean. They led to serious health problems and deaths among taste testers. Other isotopes were apparently worse, and the final quantum compound was treated as the safer option, which is such a cursed Fallout sentence. The safe version was still radioactive. The company simply found the radioactive version that killed fewer people and caused effects they could legally bury under waivers. Complaints from inside the company did not stop it either. Beverageer Kate Levitt raised concerns about the radioactive nature of the drink, but those concerns were ignored. John Caleb Bradburton's office material shows the corporate response clearly enough. Keep production going, manage liability, and soften the damage with waivers and condolence gifts. Fallout does not even need to exaggerate much there. That is the perfect old world corporation, less interested in stopping harm than making sure the harm cannot sue them. By the fourth quarter of 2077, Quantum passed inspections from the Food and Drug Association and was prepared for public release. The timing is almost too darkly funny, as Nuka-Cola Quantum was officially released on October 23, 2077, the same day the Great War began. The big glowing soda finally hit the public right as the world ended. Trucks full of it were still in transit, and bottles were scattered across the wasteland for centuries. The product survived longer than the people who tested it. Covenant and the safe test, torture disguised as synth detection. Covenant is one of the creepiest settlements in Fallout 4 because it looks too clean. By 2287, most Commonwealth towns were held together with scrap walls, rusted metal, old boards, and a prayer. Covenant is different. It has clean houses, a locked gate, friendly residents, working turrets, Deezer handing out lemonade, and Swanson sitting out front with a little entrance exam called the safe test. The whole place feels like a pre-war suburb trying very hard to pretend the wasteland is not outside the wall. That is the first warning sign. The safe test looks ridiculous at first. The sole survivor sits down and answers a string of strange psychological questions. It is basically a modified version of Vault-Tech's GOAT exam from Fallout 3, repurposed by Covenant into a synth detection tool. But the test is not harmless. It decides who gets inside Covenant and who quietly disappears. The quest Human Error begins when Honest Dan, a mercenary, investigates the missing Stockton caravan. Old Man Stockton from Bunker Hill hired him because his daughter, Amelia Stockton, vanished after the caravan was attacked. Covenant acts friendly, but the clues start piling up fast. The settlement is too defensive. The residents dodge questions. Jacob Orden, the mayor figure of Covenant, tries to keep everything under control. The caravan wreck outside the settlement points towards something organized, not a random raider hit. But the real answer is hidden at the compound. The compound is Covenant's secret laboratory, built into a nearby sewer facility. This is where Dr. Rosalind Chambers runs the real experiment. She is not trying to protect Covenant in a normal sense. She is trying to perfect a test that can identify synths hiding among humans. And because this is the Commonwealth, where the Institute has already made everyone paranoid, she has enough support from traumatized people to keep doing it. Chambers' backstory is tied to the broken mask incident in Diamond City in 2229. A Generation 3 synth named Mr. Carter malfunctioned at the market, pulled a weapon, and killed 10 people. Chambers says her parents were among the dead. That trauma becomes the engine behind her work. She does not just fear synths. She builds her whole life around finding them, exposing them, and destroying them. People who fail the safe test are kidnapped, taken to the compound, interrogated, tortured, and studied. The victim at the center of Human Error is Amelia Stockton. She is locked in a cell while Chambers and her team argue about whether she may be a synth. If the sole survivor sides with Chambers, Amelia is executed, and her body can be looted for a synth component. Chambers admits the margin of error is horrific. She says the safe test produces 4 or 5 false positives for every synth. For every actual synth they identify, several real humans can be kidnapped, tortured, and killed. And Chambers is not horrified by that number. She treats it like a technical problem. One day, she hopes to reduce it to 1 or 2 false positives per synth, as if the acceptable number of tortured innocent people is just something to optimize. The subject 12 holotapes make the experiment even worse. Subject 12 is strapped down, pressured, questioned, and repeatedly exposed to pain, while Dr. Patricia Montgomery continues asking test questions. Chambers believes synth psychology can be exposed through odd answers, but the test is absurd because almost nobody in the Commonwealth has a normal understanding of pre-war baseball anyway. Mo Cronin in Diamond City thinks baseball was played by beating people with bats. So using baseball knowledge as a synth filter in post-war Boston is not science. To sum up, Covenant is post-war human experimentation created by fear. The experiment is not hidden behind monsters or radiation. It is hidden behind clean sidewalks, polite greetings, and a gate guard asking personality questions. Vault 111, the cryogenic experiment that preserved people for theft. Vault 111 is one of the first things Fallout 4 shows you, and it is easy to miss how horrifying it is because the game throws you into the panic of the Great War so fast. 1 minute, you're in Sanctuary Hills with Codsworth, a salesman from Vault Tech, and a baby named Sean. The next minute, the sirens hit, the news confirms nuclear detonations, and everyone runs toward the vault elevator while a mushroom cloud rises behind them. That opening is chaos, but Vault 111's horror is not chaos, it is procedure. On October 23, 2077, the residents of Sanctuary Hills enter Vault 111 believing they are being saved. The staff immediately directs them into what they call decontamination pods. That word is the first lie. These are not showers, they are cryogenic suspension units. Vault Tech designed Vault 111 to observe the effects of long-term cryogenic suspended animation on unsuspecting human test subjects. The key word is unsuspecting. Nobody inside those pods agreed to become a biological time capsule. The staff knew more than the residents, but even they were not free. The overseer's instructions were strict. Suspension was not to be interrupted under any circumstance, even for life-saving measures. Science staff could only intervene if more than 80% of the resident population had died in cryogenic suspension, and even then, they could not disrupt the experiment. That detail is one of the most disturbing pieces of Vault 111's design. Vault Tech did not just want people preserved. It wanted the data more than it wanted the people alive. Then, the all-clear message never came. Vault 111 was supposed to function with staff maintaining the experiment, but the employees were trapped underground with limited supplies and no release order from Vault Tech. The Vault residents slept through the crisis, but the workers lived it. Food ran out, morale collapsed, security and science staff turned on the overseer's authority. The mutiny failed to produce a real escape, and by the time the sole survivor eventually wakes up, the staff areas are just skeletons, dead terminals, and evidence of a workplace that turned into a tomb. That would already be enough to put Vault 111 on this list. But the real second layer comes from the Institute. In 2277, 150 years after the bombs, the Institute discovered Vault 111 and realized what it contained. Pre-war humans preserved before the radiation and mutation of the Commonwealth. More specifically, it contained Sean, an infant with uncorrupted DNA. That is why they sent Conrad Kellogg and 2 Institute scientists into the vault. They were not there to rescue anyone. They were there to retrieve genetic material in human form. The scene is brutal because of how clinical it is. Kellogg opens the pod containing Sean and the sole survivor's spouse. The spouse refuses to hand over the baby. Kellogg shoots them, takes Sean, and the sole survivor is frozen again, forced to watch the murder and kidnapping before being thrown back into suspension. Kellogg's memory later reveals that the Institute deliberately kept the sole survivor alive as a backup. Everyone else was expendable, while the other frozen residents eventually died of asphyxiation due to life support failure. The monitoring terminal confirms that the only surviving residents were the sole survivor, their spouse, and Sean, with the rest listed dead. So Vault 111 becomes a double experiment. First, Vault Tech freezes innocent people for cryogenic data, then the Institute raids the experiment like a freezer full of clean genetic samples. MedTech research, the child virus trials, and Prevent. MedTech Research is one of those Fallout 4 locations that looks like a normal ruined office building until you understand why the doors were sealed. The facility sits in the Commonwealth, and by 2287 it is packed with feral ghouls, broken offices, security systems, locked sublevels, and the remains of a medical corporation that never deserved the word medical in its name. MedTech Research was a private pre-war laboratory owned by MedTech Laboratories, and its main focus was infectious disease research. One of the diseases connected to MedTech affected teenagers and children. The rumors that survive into the Commonwealth talk about a sickness that caused blue boils, and by the time we hear about it through Robert Joseph McCready's companion quest, Long Road Ahead, it is not some abstract terminal entry anymore. McCready's son, Duncan, is sick. No doctor has been able to cure him. McCready has already lost his wife, Lucy, and the thought of losing Duncan is what finally sends him back toward MedTech. McCready tells the sole survivor that he heard about a possible cure through a man named Sinclair. Sinclair had a friend with a similar illness, and he believed MedTech Research might still contain the treatment. But the facility is locked down, and the key to the deeper levels is not something you can just loot from a desk. During Long Road Ahead, McCready gives the password needed to access the executive terminal. That terminal lets the player override the containment lockdown, open the airlock systems, and enter the sublevels where the real ugliness is buried. The name of the treatment is Prevent. On paper, Prevent was an experimental treatment for an unknown disease. In practice, it was developed through human trials using test subjects locked in the facility's lower levels. And the sublevels were not ordinary patient rooms. The lore describes an immense prison system beneath the research building, housing dozens of test subjects. MedTech was not testing medicine in a clean clinical environment with consent forms and aftercare. It was holding people in cells and treating their bodies like supply inventory. The terminal summaries make the whole thing even colder. A batch report from September 2077 lists test outcomes like a shopping receipt. Experiment 9823 subjects reporting hair loss, Experiment 4786 antidote causing cysts in adult test subjects, Experiment 2312 subjects reporting erections MedTech was buying or acquiring people, tracking them like expenses and calling the damage research. Then, the Great War came. The director received advanced warning of the incoming nuclear attack and placed the facility into lockdown to prevent dangerous pathogens from spreading. That sounds responsible for about half a second until you hear the rest. The lockdown authorized lethal force against anyone trying to escape. Researchers and test subjects were trapped inside. Executives, of course, had evacuation procedures. The system was designed exactly how you would expect from a Fallout corporation. The people at the top had a way out, and everyone below them became containment material. One man, Wayne Turnquist, managed to escape because he hacked the director's terminal and saw the forwarded warnings. He fled to gather his family before the bombs hit. Everyone else was not so lucky. 2 centuries later, the place is full of feral ghouls, meaning the staff, subjects, or trapped personnel were left inside long enough to become part of the facility's afterlife. When McCready and the sole survivor finally reach the cure, it is found in the sublevels, past the lockdown, past the ghouls, and near the remains of the old research wing. The cure is real. That is the sickest part. MedTech was not completely fake. Somewhere under all the abuse, they had something that could save Duncan, but Fallout never lets that be clean. McCready can send the cure to Daisy and Goodneighbor, and Daisy can pass it along to Duncan. But that does not erase the people MedTech destroyed to make it possible. The Robobrain program, human brains turned into machine parts. The Robobrain sounds ridiculous until you stop laughing and remember what the name actually means. It is not called a Robobrain because it has advanced artificial intelligence. It is called a Robobrain because there is an actual organic human brain inside the machine. That is what makes this one of Fallout's most horrifying experiments. It is a military-industrial project where the solution to machine intelligence was to take a person's brain, erase as much of the person as possible, and use what remained as hardware. The Robobrain was developed before the Great War by General Atomics International and the US Army, with indirect support from Robco Industries. In Fallout 4's Automatron DLC, the game gives us one of the clearest looks at how ugly the program really was. The Mechanist's lair is hidden under the Robco Sales and Service Center in East Boston, but before Isabel Cruz ever found it and became the Mechanist, that underground facility was officially the United States of America Robotics Technology Facility RB-2851. Even the location is pure Fallout. Upstairs, it is a normal Robco service center, selling and maintaining terminals. Downstairs, behind a hidden military door requiring an MSAT-equipped robot to open, there is a full pre-war Robobrain production site. The workers upstairs were told not to touch suspicious shipments or they would face extensive questioning by our friends downstairs. That line tells you everything. The public-facing business was a cover for a compartmentalized military lab. Inside RB-2851, the facility was divided into production, facilities, and research wings. Prisoners were housed in a quasi-prison section, operated on, had their brains extracted, then had those brains wiped, tested, installed into Robobrain heads, and mounted onto robotic bodies. Dr. Burt Riggs was one of the lead developers connected to the Robobrain project. In Far Harbor, we meet him as a Robobrain in Vault 118, which adds another layer of horrible irony. One of the people who helped build the process later lives inside the result of that same process. Riggs's background tells us that the program used convicts as recruited subjects, which is exactly the kind of phrase Fallout corporations and military projects love. The design goal was not to preserve the human being. Ada explains the philosophy very clearly in Automatron. General Atomics wanted the human brain to accelerate decision-making, but free thought and individuality were never intended. These robots were built like soldiers, meant to follow orders without question. That is the central contradiction of the Robobrain. The human brain was valuable because it could think better than a machine, but the human identity attached to that brain was considered a defect. And the defect never fully went away. Robobrains had a known tendency toward violence, aggression, unstable behavior, and fragments of personality. The program tried to wipe memories, but human brains were resilient. They kept trying to preserve some sense of self. Sometimes the result was a malfunctioning combat robot. Vault 118 is important because it shows the other side of the experiment. There, rich residents had their brains placed into Robobrain bodies as a form of extreme life preservation. Burt Riggs even tried to preserve their voices and identities. But even then, the side effects appeared: delusion, repetition, distorted perception, and disconnect from reality. So whether the subject was a prisoner forced into the program or a millionaire buying mechanical immortality, the outcome was still a person cut away from their body and trapped in a machine. By 2287, Robobrains are still walking around the Commonwealth, the island, old military facilities, and hidden labs. The society that built them is gone, but the victims are still patrolling, still attacking, still obeying fragments of old programming. Vault 75, children raised under Malden Middle School as genetic stock. Vault 75 is one of Fallout 4's most disturbing experiments because the entrance was not hidden under a military bunker or corporate research park. It was under Malden Middle School. That location is the whole crime scene. Vault Tech did not just build a vault near children. It built the experiment directly beneath a school, then marketed it as a fast evacuation shelter for families in case the bombs fell during class hours. The sales angle was disgusting but effective. If parents wanted their children safe, Vault 75 looked like the responsible choice. There were even subsidized admissions and special enrollment incentives for families with children, especially younger students. Vault-Tec understood parental fear and turned it into recruitment. Then, October 23, 2077 happened. Families, teachers, and children entered the vault thinking they were being saved. The first phase was separated by age. Children under 17 were taken to the atrium, introduced to the vault's systems, and eased into their new underground life. The adults were taken elsewhere under the cover of orientation. Then, the adults were executed. That is the first thing to understand about Vault 75. The experiment could not work if parents were alive. Parents ask questions, parents protect children, and parents notice when education becomes conditioning. So Vault-Tec removed them immediately. The children were not simply orphaned by the bombs, they were orphaned by the vault. The official purpose of Vault 75 was the refinement of human genetics. The methods included selective breeding, genetic modification, hormonal treatments, and long-term performance tracking. Dr. Braun and his colleagues are tied to the design of those methods, which makes the whole project feel connected to Vault-Tec's wider obsession with controlled humanity. This was not just about survival. It was about manufacturing better humans under laboratory conditions. The children were raised inside a complete pipeline. They had classrooms, dormitories, testing stations, medical areas, science labs, and combat training spaces. One of the most memorable areas is the Combat Simulation Room, which recreates a ruined diner from Uptopland, the Vault's childish name for the surface world. The children were told that Uptopland was full of monsters, bandits, and people who needed saving. So every drill, every lesson, every target exercise, and every physical test was framed as preparation for a heroic mission. That is what makes Vault 75 so vile. It did not only torture children, it gave the torture a story. The selection system came when residents reached 18. That was called graduation, which might be the most Vault-Tec word choice possible. If a resident was exceptional physically, mentally, or socially, they could be taken into the genetics program and have their genes harvested. If they were not impressive enough, they were disposed of. If a subject showed high intelligence but lacked the desired physical or social traits, they might be recruited into the science staff. Even that survival was another trap. A child could live only by becoming part of the same machine that had raised them. Refusing the offer could still mean execution, so Vault 75 did not create winners. It created products, failures, and collaborators. The terminal stories make the human side uglier. One of the most important names is Washington, a resident brought into the science side because he was intelligent, suggestible, and useful. Washington's entries show how the vault blurred the line between child and staff. He is excited at first. He thinks being placed with the researchers means he is advanced, but he is still emotionally attached to the younger residents, especially a girl named Nina. That attachment becomes dangerous to the experiment. Other children begin realizing something is wrong. Rohit, James, and Alma are connected to a plan to storm the inaccessible areas where the scientists work. The idea is not complicated. Wait until the younger kids are asleep, break into the forbidden sections, and overpower the geeks. In other words, the children who were trained to be perfect soldiers start applying that training against the people who built the system. When the sole survivor finds Vault 75 in 2287, the vault is occupied by gunners. The player has to fight through them, collect access cards from gunner commanders, enter the laboratory, reach the admin area, and read the Overseer's terminal to complete the location's quest. But the real story is not the gunners. They are just squatters on top of the original horror. The real evidence is in the rooms, the classroom layout, the combat simulation, the lab overlooking the training area, the card-locked research sections, and the bones of a project that clearly ended violently. Vault 75 belongs this high on the list because it is human experimentation from birth to disposal. It controlled who got in, who died, who learned, who trained, who reproduced, who was harvested, and who was allowed to become staff. Vault 4, human-animal hybrid experiments under Hawthorne Medical Laboratories. Vault 4 is one of the most disturbing additions from the Fallout TV series because it does not feel like an old experiment you only read about through terminals. You actually see the legacy walking around. This vault was connected to Hawthorne Medical Laboratories in Los Angeles, a pre-war subsidiary of Vault-Tec. That detail matters because Vault 4 was not just another social experiment hidden under the language of public survival. It was tied directly to a medical research corporation. The vault was built near Hawthorne's main campus and designed as a research facility overseen by Lloyd Hawthorne and Cassandra Hawthorne. In Cooper Howard's old Vault-Tec advertisement, Vault 4 is pitched as a scientist-led vault populated by around 80 scientific minds working toward humanity's future, which, in Fallout language, means everyone should have run immediately. The experiment inside Vault 4 focused on radiation resistance and biological adaptation. The scientists were trying to create hybrids of humans and radioactive resistant species, basically searching for a version of humanity that could survive the post-nuclear world by changing the body itself. But Vault 4 shows what that kind of thinking actually looks like. The most horrific result is the Gulper experiment. In the show, the Gulpers resemble axolotl-like mutants, but their origin is not natural wasteland mutation. They were created through experiments involving humans and radiation-resistant species. One of the recordings tied to Vault 4 shows a woman giving birth to a school of Gulpers, and then those Gulpers eat her alive in the birth tank. That is one of the single most grotesque human experiment results Fallout has ever put on screen. And the fact that it was recorded makes it worse. These experiments were documented. The scientists were observing, analyzing, and preserving the results like the suffering itself was valuable data. That is what separates Vault 4 from a monster story. The Gulpers are horrifying, yes, but the scientists watching the process are the real horror. The Vault's later history proves the experiment became uncontrollable. The test subjects eventually rebelled against the scientists. They released the mutated victims, and the original scientific leadership was overthrown. The Hawthornes themselves tried to barricade themselves away from the consequences of their work, but the Gulpers broke through and ate them too. There is a very Fallout kind of justice there. The people who treated bodies like experimental material were finally killed by the bodies they had distorted. By 2296, when Lucy and Maximus enter Vault 4, the place has become something completely different. Overseer Benjamin leads a society made up of descendants of test subjects and survivors. The residents are strange by surface standards. Some have obvious mutations, extra physical traits, or unusual appearances. But they are not the monsters. That is the point. The people created by the experiment are more humane than the scientists who created them. Vault 4 even takes in refugees from Shady Sands after its destruction. Birdie and the others preserve grief rituals around Shady Sands, and for a while, Lucy misreads what she is seeing because the Vault's customs look unsettling from the outside. But once the truth comes out, Vault 4 becomes one of the most interesting reversals in Fallout. The Vault began as a place where scientists abused test subjects. It ends up as a refuge run by the descendants of those same victims. That does not make the original experiment any less horrific. If anything, it makes the history sharper. The residents of Vault 4 are living proof that the old scientists failed morally, not just scientifically. They tried to create a new kind of human by force, but what survived was the humanity of the victims. Big MT, lobotomites, trauma harnesses, and recycled humans. Big MT is what happens when Fallout takes every unethical scientist in the old world, locks them inside one crater, removes almost every consequence, and then lets them keep working for 200 years. The place is officially the Big Mountain Research and Development Center, but by the time we reach it in Old World Blues, everyone knows it as the Big Empty. It was a pre-war defense contractor and research facility south of Hopeville, filled with laboratories like X8, X13, X17, Y17, Z9, and the think tank itself. It was an entire industrial zone of experiments. Biological research, cybernetics, stealth suits, robotic warfare, toxins, DNA splicing, autodocs, trauma harnesses, night stalkers, cazadors. Big MT touched so many horrors in Fallout. New Vegas that the place feels less like a lab and more like the old world's trash can for science without ethics. And the human experiments are some of the worst. The most obvious victims are the lobotomites. In gameplay, they are just enemies wandering Big MT in masks, scrap armor, and broken gear. But in lore, they are surgically altered humans. Many were previous Big MT residents or Mojave wanderers captured by robotic drones and dragged into the facility. Once inside, they were processed by the Sync's autodoc routines. Their major organs could be replaced with electronic equivalents. Their higher brain functions were damaged or removed. What came out was still human-shaped, but no longer fully human in the way they had been before. That is the first thing that makes Big MT so disturbing. It does not simply kill trespassers, it recycles them. The courier learns that personally. At the start of Old World Blues, the courier is pulled into Big MT after investigating the crashed satellite at the Mojave Drive-In. When they wake up, the think tank has already taken them apart. The courier's own brain ends up alive in a brain tank, capable of talking back to them later. The spine is replaced with a cybernetic version, and the heart can be replaced with the synthetic heart. That is the tone of the whole DLC. The jokes are insane, but the facts underneath them are brutal. The think tank itself is made of pre-war scientists who transferred their brains into robotic shells after the Great War. Dr. Klein, Dr. Dalla, Dr. Zero, Dr. 8, and Dr. Boros still exist as floating brains in machines, but they are not wiser for it. They are detached, decayed, and morally hollow. Dr. Mobius traps them in recursive loops to keep them from escaping Big MT, because if their science got loose again, the wasteland would be even worse. Then there is Y17. The Y17 medical facility is one of Big MT's most important human experiment locations. It was tied to the development of the Y17 Trauma Override Harness, a full-body suit designed to retrieve injured soldiers by taking over their motor functions and walking them back to base. On paper, that sounds like battlefield rescue technology. In Fallout, that means the suit can keep moving the body even when the person inside is no longer in control. The human becomes cargo inside their own skeleton. The horror is not just hypothetical either. The trauma harnesses are part of Big MT's wider pattern of turning living people into machines, tools, or leftover components. If the brain is useful, extract it. If the organs are inconvenient, replace them. And if the body cannot obey, strap it into something that will. Christine Royce gives the story a more personal face. She was a Circle of Steel operative hunting Elijah, and her trail took her through the Big Empty. The Y17 medical facility is tied to the injuries she later carries into Dead Money. She was trapped in one of Big MT's medical research centers, and the damage affected her head, her ability to process writing, and her sense of language. The FEV program, West Tech, Huntersville, Mariposa, and Vault 87. The forced evolutionary virus is one of the most important horrors in the entire Fallout franchise, because it is not just one experiment, it is a chain reaction. FEV is why super mutants exist. It is tied to the Master, Vault 87, Mariposa, Huntersville, the Enclave, Frank Horrigan, and some of the most brutal examples of pre-war science becoming post-war monsters. What makes it worse is that it did not begin as let's create giant green murder soldiers on day one. Like many Fallout disasters, it started with language that sounded almost noble. The roots go back to WestTech and the Pan-Immunity Virion Project. In 2073, WestTech was contracted to develop a generalized immunization agent against Chinese biochemical weapons and the new plague. Their earlier viral work from the 2050s helped them get selected for that kind of research. The goal was to alter uninfected DNA so it could resist disease. That is already dangerous enough, but by 2075, the project mutates into what becomes the forced evolutionary virus. FEV rewrites the host. It forces changes in genotype and phenotype, which is Fallout's fancy science way of saying it does not merely treat the body, it changes the body's basic genetic expression. In theory, that could mean stronger immune systems, improved resistance, better physical capabilities, and maybe even a new kind of soldier. In practice, it means pain, mutation, sterility, loss of identity, mental degradation, failed subjects, and corpses dumped into incinerators. The Appalachia side of the program makes that clear. In February 2076, WestTech's branch in Appalachia joined the FEV research effort and was ordered to begin human experimentation to push the virus to its practical limits. This became part of the super mutant program. The target was not one prisoner in one lab. WestTech poisoned the drinking water of Huntersville, West Virginia, creating the first super mutants in Appalachia right before the Great War. When residents drank it, the sickness, mutations, military quarantine, and cover-up followed. By the time the player reaches Huntersville in 2102, the town and the WestTech Research Center are super mutant strongholds. The experiment did not end with the bombs. It simply became part of Appalachia's ecosystem. Then there is Mariposa. Mariposa Military Base is the West Coast heart of the FEV nightmare. On January 7, 2077, FEV research was moved to the newly constructed base, and Captain Roger Maxon's military unit was assigned to protect the project. This is one of those moments where Fallout's entire timeline bends around one moral discovery. Maxon and his soldiers eventually learned that human beings were being used in FEV testing. He was horrified enough to mutiny, seize control of the base, and break away from the United States government. That rebellion becomes the seed of the Brotherhood of Steel. So FEV does not only create monsters, it helps create one of Fallout's biggest factions, because the first Brotherhood was born from soldiers realizing the government they served was turning people into experiments. But the virus kept surviving. Vault 87 in Fallout 3 shows the East Coast version of the same nightmare. Located in the capital wasteland, northwest of Little Lamplight, Vault 87 housed the Evolutionary Experimentation Program. Its FEV research was led through personnel like Dr. Wayne Merrick, whose name appears in the Vault's terminal records. The Vault's purpose was not normal shelter life. It was accelerated evolution research on human subjects. By the time the Lone Wanderer reaches Vault 87 in 2277, the FEV tanks are depleted, failed FEV subjects still exist inside, and the Vault has become sacred ground for capital wasteland supermutants. Fox, one of the most memorable intelligent supermutants in Fallout 3, is locked in an isolation room. Other failed subjects are hideously mutated remains of the experiment. And outside the Vault, the supermutants continue kidnapping humans to expose them to FEV because they cannot reproduce naturally. FEV Curling 13, the Enclave's human genocide trial, and we are now at number 1 of our list. FEV Curling 13 is the most horrifying human experiment in Fallout because it is not really an experiment anymore by the time Fallout 2 happens. It is the final product. FEV Curling 13 is the point where all of that old-world logic reaches its natural conclusion. The Enclave does not want data anymore. It wants a clean planet. The project is based on FEV-2, recovered from the ruins of Mariposa Military Base. After the Master's defeat, Mariposa remained one of the most important sources of FEV research in the world. In 2236, Enclave forces rediscovered the base and began excavating it. That operation was not clean either. Frank Horrigan, then still a human Enclave Secret Service agent, was exposed to FEV during the Mariposa operation and sent back to the oil rig for study. He would later become the massive cybernetic mutant weapon we fight at the end of Fallout 2. So even before Curling 13 is finished, the Enclave is already producing monsters while claiming it represents pure humanity. The man behind the final strain is Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, head of the Enclave's chemical cores. He works from Control Station Enclave, the oil rig off the coast of San Francisco. The name Curling 13 comes from him and from the 13th perfected version of the modified strain. By 2241, the Enclave considered it ready. The goal is not to create super soldiers anymore. It is to turn FEV into a targeted killing machine. And the target is basically everyone who is not part of the Enclave. President Dick Richardson explains the ideology clearly in Fallout 2. To the Enclave, the people of the wasteland are not citizens, survivors, or even fully human. They are mutants, regardless of how normal they look. Ghouls, super mutants, tribals, town settlers, NCR citizens, wasteland-born humans, all of them are contaminated in Enclave thinking. Richardson frames the project as humanity's last best hope, which is exactly the kind of genocidal language Fallout uses to show you how monsters justify themselves. Curling 13 was designed to bond with human glycoproteins. That means it targets humans and human-based mutants while leaving animals and plants alone. The plan was horrifyingly efficient. The Enclave would release the virus from the oil rig into the atmosphere and let the jet streams carry it across the globe. No armies needed, just aerosolized extinction. The testing is where it becomes a human experiment in the most literal way. The Enclave kidnapped Arroyo villagers and Vault 13 residents because they needed live population samples. Arroyo mattered because its people descended from Vault stock through the Vault dwellers' bloodline and generations in the wasteland. Vault 13 mattered because its residents were considered genetically cleaner and useful for comparison. The Enclave did not see either group as people. They were test categories. The results were monstrous. Exposure to a tiny aerosol concentration could kill Arroyo villagers in under an hour, causing massive hemorrhaging, inflammation, and organ failure. Vault 13 dwellers had an even worse version of the death because they lasted longer. The symptoms included burning throat, heartburn, burning lungs, drowsiness, blindness, subdermal hemorrhaging, and convulsions. The agony lasted an average of 14.5 hours. No test subject survived. That is the detail that makes Curling 13 feel worse than standard FEV mutation. With super mutants, there is at least the horrible possibility that something remains afterward. But Curling 13 does not even offer mutation as an outcome. It is engineered suffering, followed by death, optimized through repeated trials. The Enclave even needed an inoculation for itself because the virus would not magically spare them. Vice President Daniel Byrd volunteered to test an early antidote, and it caused severe brain damage. Richardson still calls him a national hero, which says everything about Enclave morality. Even their own people are expendable as long as the project moves forward. By the time the Chosen One reaches the oil rig, the final scale is insane. The Enclave's manufacturing estimate reaches 250,000 gallons of the virus in 6 weeks. Their projections suggest global saturation in around 2 weeks once released into the jet streams. The oil rig contains the detention level where Arroyo villagers and Vault 13 residents are held, research labs, medical facilities, presidential offices, and Curling's own workspace. And the final horror is how close it came. Richardson says release is only hours away. If the Chosen One does not infiltrate Control Station Enclave, free the prisoners, defeat Frank Horrigan, and destroy the oil rig, the Enclave's project begins with Arroyo and Vault 13, then spreads outward to everyone else. And that is what makes Fallout's human experiments so disturbing. The wasteland is full of monsters, but most of them were not born from the apocalypse. They were designed before it, documented before it, funded before it, and in some cases, perfected after it. Nuka-Cola turned radioactive military research into a glowing consumer product. Covenant tortured travelers because paranoia became easier to justify than mercy. Vault 111 froze families like biological storage. MedTech locked children and test subjects beneath a medical facility. The Robobrain program reduced human minds into machine parts. Vault 75 turned childhood into genetics work. Vault 4 twisted bodies into hybrid experiments. Big MT recycled people into lobotomites, organ donors, and research leftovers. West Tech's FEV program transformed towns, soldiers, and Vault residents into something they never chose to become. And then, the Enclave took all of that old-world cruelty to its final conclusion with FEV Curling 13. Not just experimentation, not just mutation, but a trial run for global extermination. That is the real horror of Fallout. The bombs did not create cruelty. They exposed the world that had already normalized it. Every terminal entry, every lab report, every locked cell, every test subject number reminds us that someone saw human suffering and called it progress. So which Fallout experiment disturbed you the most? Was it Big MT, Vault 75, Vault 111, the Robobrain program, or the Enclave's Curling 13 plan? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you want more deep Fallout lore breakdowns like this, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one.